Welcome to Leadership Moments.
In every great leader's life, there are pivotal moments that shape their character, test their resilience, and awaken their vision.
Together, we'll uncover the invaluable lessons hidden within these transformative moments.
Hello, and welcome to Leadership Moments podcast. I am Tracy Ann Palmer, and I will be your host for today. I have a very special guest that I'm really excited to introduce you to. Brad Englert is an experienced author, advisor, technologist with over 40 years of experience in the private and public sectors. He was at Accenture for 22 years, including 10 years as a partner, and then went to the University of Texas, Austin for 8 years, including 7 years as the Chief Information Officer. Brad is the founder of Brad Englert Advisory. His recent book, Spheres of Influence, How to Create and Nurture Authentic Business Relationship, offers a practical guide to help emerging and established leaders develop and perfect the critical hard skill of building effective and lasting professional relationships. The crunchy real-world stories in this book, they are relevant to a diverse range of industries, organizations, and backgrounds. The internal sphere of influence are those relationships with whom you have the most impact. So think of your boss, your executive leaders, your direct reports, your staff. And then the other relationships with customers, peers, and influencers and vendors form that external sphere of influence. So I'm excited you're with us today. A great conversation we're going to have with Brad, and we're going to get right into it. Oh, Brad, it's so good to have you with us today, and I'm so excited to share you and your great, incredible book, Spheres of Influence, with all of our audience today.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
You are very, very welcome. So I'm going to dive right in, all right? Please, can you share with our audience the core message behind Spheres of Influence and really how it connects to being an effective leader today?
Yeah, the book is designed to help emerging and established leaders build the critical hard skill, not soft skill, hard skill of building and nurturing effective business relationships. And it's not something you're born with. You actually can learn this skill. And that's what I try to convey in the book.
Yeah, that's fantastic. From my perspective, this is something that in today's environment, everyone is a team, right? Nobody's an isolated silo.
Right.
And many of those people are you have to influence. They don't report to you,
Right.
so you can't tell them what to do.
That's right.
Uh, and most of the projects we do, I mean, you've come from a long history of working at places like Accenture and being in executive positions in the government and running, being a CIO. And most of the things you're doing every day is you're influencing others when you're running transformation and digital transformation. I mean, it impacts everybody.
Yes, yes.
So from your view, what are maybe some of the most critical spheres of influence a leader should focus on to really create a lasting impact and to have, to really cultivate those relationships?
Well, what I've found is there are two spheres of influence. Those people who are closest to you, that's your inner sphere of influence, and that would be your boss. It would be your direct reports. It could be executive leadership and all your staff. So often you're working with them all the time. And then the external sphere of influence is what you're talking about, where you have less direct impact. You don't have line control, and that would be your customers, peers and influencers, and strategic vendor partners. And I find that in all those relationships, if you reach out and ask, what are their goals and aspirations? Take the time to do that. And then determine if you can help them. Sometimes you can. You refer them to someone else, but oftentimes you can. And then if you're going to help, set and manage those expectations. And the third major principle being genuinely care about their success. When
Mm.
I joined the university, I met with this professor who'd been there for 40 years. I worked with him on a statewide network 15 years prior, successful project. And I said, okay, give me some advice. He goes, get out of the office and tell people you give a damn. And that was the best advice ever, because you need to not be in your ivory tower and expect people to come and supplicate. You need to get out and meet with your direct reports in their office, meet with the
Mm.
boss in their office, meet with your why would I meet with my direct reports in their office? Because I can walk through the workspace and their team sees me walking through the workspace. I say hi, we talk, I get to meet people
Yeah.
and they see me coming to their boss and every week, like clockwork.
Mm.
And same thing with peers and influencers. I walk across campus to see an associate dean. I bump into people. There are 54,000 students, 4,000 faculty, 21,000 staff. You got to get out there and meet those who you work with, especially your peers.
Yeah, I love that. I really love that because, I think we all bring different skills to the table. And you don't ever know when you build those relationships, you really never know where those relationships could go in terms
Hmm.
of helping each other, collaborating,
Hmm.
coming up with new ways of doing things,
Right.
right? Because you're all at different levels and you see things from different perspective.
Right.
And I call that diversity of thought. And
Hmm.
for you, in your role at the university, I think that's pretty critical because these are the people you serve
Right.
every day.
Well, and my peers are responsible for all the buildings. Well, we have 16 million square feet of buildings. All those buildings need IT. So I need to be
Yeah,
working with them. Another peer of mine generates all the electricity. We self generate our electricity. Well, what happens if that goes off and the backup fails? So we planned for that. And you know what? 2 years later, the electricity did go out and the backup failed. But we knew how to deal with it.
yeah,
A woman who's vice provost wanted to flip the classroom. She wanted to transform teaching and learning by having lectures recorded and then have the students review the lectures and come in class and talk, have a discussion. And the problem was our tool set for that was old and broken. So I worked with her as a peer with the students and faculty to pick a new tool that actually helped her achieve that goal. And that's a lot of fun. But if I
yeah, I
never
love
got out to meet with her, I wouldn't even know that's what she's trying to do.
Yeah, exactly. And then you take that care concept back. And I love what you said because I remember one of the CEOs I worked with, he always said, you give before you get.
Mhm. Mhm.
You always are looking out for someone else's interests.
Right.
And by doing that, you always get more back
I would agree with
from
that. Yep.
So I love that. Now, when we talk about influence, sometimes your environments aren't ideal. So what I mean by that is you may have challenging peers, for
Mhm.
example. You may be working in an environment that's very competitive, or it might just be a challenging environment because there's volatility. Maybe the company's under a little bit of duress. So there's all these factors, right, that sort of come
Mhm.
into our day to day. And you know what I'm talking about because you've done consulting, and you've been there. How can leaders really identify and strengthen their spheres of influence in those challenging environments, especially when they don't really have formal authority?
Mhm. Mhm. So I had a challenging peer, and I found that by meeting with him frequently, about every 2 weeks. I could kind of stay close to what he was thinking or wanting to do. And he had worked for our boss for 13 years. I was brand new. And so he had the trust of the boss. And I would notice that I would get emails from the boss that were these clouds of words 1 minute after my peer and the boss had a meeting, because I can see the calendar. Everyone can see everyone's calendar. So
Yeah.
it didn't take a PhD to figure that one out. And the
Yeah.
boss's emails were always on his mobile phone, so very short, no subject matter. But these clouds of words emails would come in, and I finally sat down with my boss and I said, I cannot work this way. If
Mm.
you're giving me my peers' orders through your headset, then you don't need me.
Yeah.
So hold me accountable for my organization, hold him accountable for his organization, but don't have orders given to me from him. You don't
Yeah.
need me. And he actually said, "Well, thank you for the frank conversation." And
Mhm.
he eventually stopped doing it. But it was an old habit where and he had that trust in the peer. Over time, that behavior became visible to others in the organization. And finally, the boss's peer said, "You need to deal with this person," because he was trying to take over parts of my organization. He was trying to take over parts of other people's organizations. Just like, stop it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm responsible for my organization.
Yeah.
330 people, $40 million budget. Don't mess with me.
Yeah. Well, but what you're pointing out is really important, and I want the audience to have that as a really big takeaway, which is, first of all, you set your boundaries,
Hmm.
and you had an open and honest conversation about uh, that um, you're an owner with responsibility,
Hmm.
first of all, and that responsibility was up to your boss, not to your peer.
Right, right.
So hold me responsible, hold me accountable,
Hmm.
and let us have that direct relationship, without sort of this undermining, because what he was really doing was undermining you.
Right, right. And he had to have the courage to confront it.
That's right. You have to have the courage to confront that. And you can do that in a very respectful, diplomatic
Exactly,
way.
exactly.
But that is the key, right? Is when you see that kind of stuff happening, to really address it head on, because that doesn't help you from a career perspective in the long run.
Yeah, I found that, that was an example of trusting someone I shouldn't have trusted. He
Yeah.
had kind of this fake niceness. He had this inability to be held accountable for anything.
Mm.
He would gossip to me about my other peers, which I knew he was doing the same for me. And his direct reports were kind of doing the same to my direct reports. So we basically came up with a strategy, my direct reports and I, that we would take the high road. We
Mhm.
would, when confronted, we would be non confrontational. And
Mm.
later, when he accused me of doing the same thing, quote unquote, I said, no, we agreed years ago not to do the same thing. So you're wrong. But
Yeah.
it was challenging.
Yeah. But I love that too, because I always do believe in taking the high road,
Hmm.
and not replicating the same bad behavior, because
Right.
that is not true leadership.
Because
Right.
pigs like being in mud. So
That's right.
don't get in with them.
That's right. Exactly. So another question that I have for you is, what role do you think mentoring and collaboration sort of play in this expanding one's influence, and how can leaders
best cultivate these relationships? I know you've done a lot of mentoring in your career. I'm sure you're still mentoring.
Yep.
So I'd love to know your point of view on this.
Well, at the firm from day one, you had a mentor. And over the years, you became a mentor and a mentee. You continue to be a mentee. And as you grew in your career, um, you were given stretch opportunities, etc. In working with my peers, who eventually many of them became partners as well, you by collaborating with them, you often found opportunities for your mentees to get a stretch role, to you know be, an opportunity to serve the other peer. That helps them, and it helps your mentee. So I think just the whole philosophy of the firm was, if we work together, we grow the pie bigger. And if
Yeah.
there's a value in mentoring, cultural emphasis on training. Every year, you're either in a class or taking a class, teaching a class or taking a class.
Mm.
And my last year, 22 years, 3 months before I retired, I'm in our training center in Chicago, 200 people from around the world, 4 or 5 partners, and we were teaching project management skills. And it's like, what a joy. It's like, that was a lot of fun.
That's wonderful. That's amazing. And I love the other thing I got from what you just said is never stop learning and
Right.
never stop growing.
That's right.
Yeah, which I really love. Now, for those that are on the call with us, for aspiring leaders, and I have the opportunity to speak to a lot of mid-level leaders, as well as those that are maybe running teams, but they're not quite where they need to be.
Hmm.
What practical steps would you recommend for growing their influence within their organizations or communities?
Well, I think you need to be strategic and you need to be intentional. So let's start with something easy. Your boss. Take the time to understand what their goals and aspirations are, set and manage expectations, and care. In a consulting world, bosses have sales targets. Those get bigger every year, they don't get smaller. How can you help them achieve their goal? I always made sure I made more money from the firm than my salary, but how can I help them? So that's start with your boss. And if you have direct reports, have a refreshing conversation with them and say, where do you want to be with your career? What can I do to help you? Do you want to be a CIO someday? If yes, then when I take my vacation, you can be the interim CIO. You can try it out. Do you want to be a network engineer and that's what you want to do? Great. I need network engineers.
Yeah.
You know, executive leaders. You need to prepare yourself for an opportunity to work with executive leaders. Well, how do you do that? You understand the organization's mission. Why does the organization exist? The vision. Where does leadership think they'll be in 5 years? The values. What are the values? And a lot of this is public information. It's on the website. So when you get called to help an executive, you're not caught flat-footed. You know what the strategy is. You know what the mission is. You know what the vision is. You know what the values are, and then you can help with that. All your staff. I used to write a weekly blog that went out to all my staff. Well, why did I do that? Because the grapevine doesn't work. If you rely as a leader for your message to pass down to your direct reports to their teams, it doesn't happen. And if you have 330 people, and I actually learned this technique at a large research one university that had a troubled transformation project, and we eventually turned it around. But I needed to give the messages, not let the grapevine rule. And so at the University of Texas, we had kind of a reactive fire drill heroics type culture. And I really wanted to create a proactive, customer focused culture. And so we articulated those values. We want to collaborate with our customers. We want to be trustworthy. We want to um, be transparent. We want to communicate. And you know what the number one value was? Family first. Well,
I love
why family first? Well, I'm working in Austin, Texas. I have multinational IT corporations who
mm,
and startups, many startups that offer higher pay. So
mhm,
the way I compete is family first is our value. So if you have a school play, go to the school play. You have a doctor's appointment, go to the doctor's appointment. Do not come in sick. You're not a hero. I'm going to stay home if I'm sick. You stay home if you're sick. Don't check email 24 hours a day. I won't. And I have to walk the walk. I take my vacations. I leave on a reasonable time. I, just you got to show or demonstrate those, model the behaviors. That's the words
yeah,
I'm looking for. Um,
yeah,
but we eventually made that transition. Um, and so I think you just need to think about, let's take customers. You don't have to meet with all your customers, but you know your best customers. You know your biggest customers. Biggest is not always best.
mhm,
So identify those partners who you're doing the most work with, and then meet with them, share where you're going, um, tell them what you want to learn from them, and work together towards those goals. So I had a vendor who we were building a new data center, $32 million data center. We had budgeted for their current line of networking equipment, but they then just released their next generation line of network equipment. Well, we couldn't afford that. But because we had worked together for so long, they said, you know what? We want you to be a reference for us. So we
mm,
will give you this next generation at the cost that you've budgeted for the current generation. And that lasted us several more years. Um, and they were a valued strategic partner. I
yeah,
had others that were transactional. They'd show up once a year for their money, usually 10% more. They didn't care about us. They didn't help us. And I eventually squeezed them out and replaced them with firms who did care.
yeah,
Peers and influencers, take your org chart and circle those people who you think you should be working with.
mm,
They could be peers, they could be an influencer. What do I mean by influencer? At one research one university, the CFO had a chief of staff who had been there for 30 years. She was well trusted and beloved across the university, helped him solve many issues with resourcing and everything. And I worked with her
mm,
closely. I go to another research one university, same size. I'd meet with the chief of staff of the CFO, and she goes, Brad, I'm only been here 2 years. I'm doing these little projects. I don't think you should waste your time talking to me. It's like
wow,
how refreshing. And she was right. And she was gone in a year. So, you have to actually look at an org chart and identifying peers and influencers. That's a technique called power mapping. So
hmm,
you're strategic and intentionally finding who you should be working with.
yeah, that's that's great advice. The power mapping concept, love that. Absolutely love that.
Mhm.
So, we're, I know we've probably got just a few more minutes here before we hear that sound. Where can people buy your book, Spheres of Influence?
Wherever books are sold, I'm going to send you a customized welcome page, customized for your podcast, that will send
Awesome.
them to one, a free sample of the book, two, ways to buy the book, and three, ways to schedule time on my calendar. So,
Fantastic. Oh, fantastic. That's really good. Because let me tell you, for our audience, I had an opportunity to spend some time with Brad before we actually jumped on the podcast, and I I had to say, hey, Brad, I'm going to cut us off because we have to have time for the podcast. But I could have actually spent the whole 60 minutes just talking to Brad because it was fascinating, interesting. And certainly Brad speaks my language, as I know he does with all of our audience as well. So it's great to have you with us. Okay,
Thank
there's
you.
that sound. There's that sound. All right. So, Brad, I have 2 questions for you. This is sort of the fun portion of the podcast, right? If you could be an animal, what would you be and why?
I would be my wife's cat. And she has 2, and they are so spoiled and loved that, and being a cat, you can take it or leave it,
Totally. That's hysterical. Well, and what are their names?
Nora and Nell.
Nora and Nell. Okay, so
Yeah.
you would
They're
want to be
sisters.
Nora or Nell.
They're
Oh, that's
sisters.
so cute. Oh, that's awesome. All right, second question. What is one of your favorite family traditions?
We go as a family to Australia about every 5 to 7 years to see the families I lived with when I was an exchange student. Many years ago. And about 10 years ago, I was visiting with one of my Aussie mums, and I said, "Oh, I'm the chief information officer at the University of Texas at Austin." She looked at me and said, "I didn't think you were that smart."
Funny.
I said, "Well, I was 17 when you met me, so I wasn't that smart."
Totally.
So
Hey,
we were just there this past August and saw
fun.
everybody. It was a lot of fun.
Oh, that's fantastic. And the fact that you're still doing that with the family and you've now included that in, they know the people that you were with when you were 17, which
Right.
is so
And they've seen
that,
our 2
that
boys grow up to be young men, so
oh, that's wonderful. That's just great. That's awesome. Well, Brad, it's been such a delight having you on the show today.
great. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And we will share all your information for everyone that is with us today. Thanks for joining us. Remember, together we make a difference as leaders. And please go and check out Brad's book, Sphere of Influence. It's doing very, very well out there. I know that. And there's a lot of great practical tips, tools, tricks, strategies for you to include in your own leadership journey. So, Brad, thanks again for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And that concludes another episode of Leadership Moments. We hope you found inspiration and valuable insights in what we shared today. Remember, leadership is not defined solely by titles or positions, but by the choices we make and the moments that shape us.
Embrace the challenges that come your way, for they may be the very moments that propel you toward greatness. We'd love to hear your thoughts and stories as well. Connect with us on our website at leadershipmomentspodcast.com or through social media on Instagram at Tracy_Ann Palmer.
And Stacy Castor _. Remember, your leadership moment could be just around the corner, waiting for you to seize it. This is Stacy Castor, and what doesn't challenge you won't change you.
And this is Tracy Ann Palmer. And be the change you wish to see in the world.